Right, well, to tell us more now about this story, we're joined by Lesotho correspondent Nthakoana Ngatane. Nthakoana, thanks for joining us. Well, it's been almost a year since Tom Thabane left the country, and only now talks on his return and the return of other leaders are surfacing again. But it appears that it's in a bit of trouble. So what's happened since last May?
Well, I think the key thing that we have to mention is that after Tom Thabane left, he was followed by the leader of the BNP and the leader of the RCL, both his allies in the opposition. But immediately then after that, in June, that's when the former army commander Maparangwe Mahao was killed by other soldiers. That prompted the coming in of the SADC Commission of Inquiry that then later recommended the removal of the reappointed commander, Nthakoana Ngatane. And this is the basis now on which Thabane and his allies are saying, well, because Ngatane was reappointed as army commander and he was the reason that they fled in the first place, they will not come back into the country until he is removed. But also, after that, you remember that earlier on this year in January, the double troika of SADC met in Botswana, and there it recommended the suspension of Lesotho, even though it didn't eventually come out in the communique itself. But these were some of the talks that happened. But then the opposition started talks with the government following the recommendation by SADC that the government should be instrumental or facilitate the return of the opposition leaders that have fled. And the talks have been going on up and down. They have talked about whether or not the opposition leaders should get security from SADC. SADC has said, well, that is an issue that needs to be discussed with the government of Lesotho. And now here we are. They are saying, well, if Nthakoana Ngatane is still the commander, we're not going back to Lesotho.
We also hear that the main source of disagreement is whether or not the army commander should be fired. Why is this an issue?
Well, as I've said, Nthakoana Ngatane was removed legally. Now the Commission of Inquiry says it's found that his removal by Tom Thabane was legal. It says the reappointment of Nthakoana Ngatane by Mosisili, the current Prime Minister, was legal but flawed. It also says that the removal of Mahao should not have happened. Now, these are some of the recommendations that came out in the Commission of Inquiry that SADC put together to investigate the death of Mahao, as well as the instability in the country. So as a result of that, because of the specific recommendation by the SADC Commission of Inquiry that Nthakoana Ngatane should be removed because, according to the Commission and its findings, his reappointment perpetuates the divisions in the army in Lesotho, or the instability that is in the country. And this is the basis on which now the opposition is saying, well, because of that and our own reasons, because we fled, because we were fearing for our lives from him and his supporters, we are now saying that that is a condition. But of course, you've now heard the Minister of Foreign Affairs saying, no, that is not a condition, and that cannot be a condition for them to return.
Earlier this year, the SADC double troika talked about suspending Lesotho. Even though the SADC communique said nothing about it. With this development, is the government concerned that this won't come to pass?
Well, seemingly not. As you've heard the foreign minister saying now, when we spoke to him, he said to us he believes that the spirit of the negotiations should not be a give or take, or take it or leave it kind of spirit of the negotiations. Although he says that it is important for the government to consider the opposition to come back to the country and to make sure that the opposition comes back to the country, he does not believe, he says, that the talks have collapsed. He believes that they will still talk some more. But the government is adamant that they are right. He says that the removal of Nthakoana Ngatane or his staying in the command of the Lesotho Defence Force is a matter of the wider security reforms that are happening in Lesotho. Therefore, it cannot happen on its own or be a condition for the opposition to return to Lesotho. He says they're not worried that SADC will understand where they're coming from when they go back to report to SADC later on this year, which will be in August, when the summit meets in Swaziland.
Okay. Nthakoana Ngatane, thank you very much. Our Lesotho correspondent with me in studio on that story.
Thanks, Natasha.